Hello everyone, this is Buzz66Boy, your derp nerd here, and coming at you with another tutorial, this one on advanced single stage to orbit design. Now recently, I've been doing a live stream where we take single stage to orbit craft to lathe. And that's pretty awesome, but it takes quite a bit of engineering to make a plane that can do something like that. So we're going to start off, and this is kind of picking up where my basic SSTO tutorial left off. And one of the first things I'll tell you when I make an SSTO is that for advanced ones, I generally use this cockpit. And that's because I like to have docking ports on the front of my single stage to orbit craft. Now we're going to have our inline advanced stabilizer, SAS module, essentially. We're going to have 2 nuclear generators on this to keep us stable throughout the flight. And so there are 2. And we're going to make a fuselage. So now you have to think about balancing. Do you want more jet fuel or more rocket fuel? So basically, the more rocket fuel you have, also the more jet fuel you need to bring, because you have a heavier payload to bring into orbit. What I generally use are these for my spacecraft. Even though it doesn't look so nice, you can also use this adapter. I'm going to point out why I do that. So here we have... Look at that. Okay. A total mass of, that's essentially 1. It rounds up to 1. Liquid fuel of 160 and a dry mass of 0.2. Now, what looks slightly better is this one. But it has 0.15 more dry mass, and it has 0.1 more starting mass. Other than that, they're identical, other than this also has 10 less fuel. So you're carrying more mass, you have less fuel, and you have more dead weight to haul around. So these two scale proportionately. This one's 0.999, this is 0.5, half the fuel, half the dry mass. And they also have very high impact tolerance, all of these. This one scales the same way. But because of the odd center of mass, its center of mass is like down here. I really don't use those that often. So we're going to start with, I think, just that. And one of the things you always have to keep in mind with advanced single stage to orbit craft is fuel flow. Next, I'm going to take, actually I'm going to take, what am I going to take? I'm going to take these and put 2 of them on the side. Now, what we're going to do is have 1 rocket and 2 jets. I have found that even on planets like Duna, you can, with an airplane, you only really need 1 nuke to take off. So we're going to have the nuke in the center, and we're going to have 2 jet engines on the sides. Now, fuel flow is all messed up right now, but as we drain fuel, our center of mass shouldn't shift that much, because most of our fuel is right in here. So we're going to add some fuel lines, and we're going to have them go both ways. So we're going to take these and go to here, and then we're going to have these go to here. Right? Okay. So that gets some of the basics out of the way. You'll notice our center of thrust is in line with our center of mass. You want to always have that and you want to check it separately for your jets and your rocket. And remember, if you're mounting things on top or bottom, you have to have it symmetrically mounted. So now we're going to put wings on it. And I generally use these swept wings because they have a very low total mass, 0.05, very low drag, and a high lift rating. For a lot more mass, 0.07, you get slightly more lift rating. Okay? And these also, you can't stack them on top of each other. You can't, what I'm saying is you can't go like this. It doesn't look good. Though it would probably work fairly well. Interesting thing to note, on these ones, you can stack them nicely. But an interesting thing to note is that on these, when you do single, all of the lift is centered at this point right here. I have no idea why that is. But all of the lift from this wing, you'd think it would be somewhere in the middle. So if you ever make single wing designs, like if you're trying to make a biplane or something, you have to be aware of that. So we're going to I generally do 3 layers. So I do that, then that, and then that. Now I'm going to take this one and see how it keeps curving. I don't like how that keeps curving. So we're going to click on this, and if you hold shift, in this case it's S, and do it twice, it'll line up so it's nice and straight, and it looks nice, and it also doesn't mess with your center of lift so much. So now we need to adjust these slightly to get them exactly where we want them. And I found by hitting the C key, you can actually mess around a little more with everything, having it not snap to angle. You'll notice I'm going to move it up. I found for advanced SSTOs, it's really best if you just keep your center of mass on your center of lift, or the center of lift can be slightly behind it. You don't want much difference. So we're going to add these small control surfaces. As mentioned in the basic tutorial, the small control surfaces, their lift rating is 0.5 and their mass is 0.01. The larger ones have 4 times the mass and only a little less than 1.5 times the lift. So it's quite pointless to have a big one on there unless you're doing it for it, like if you're going to put like 5 of these on. So I'd do 1 on the inner wings and 1 on the outer wings. Alright, so you'll notice that our center of lift is behind our center of mass. And we can't change that too much by moving it, but we can slightly. So I'm going to move the side things like that. The side fuel tanks. Okay, next I'm going to do landing gear, and then we're going to do air intakes. And air intakes are the most vital part of your experience. For landing gear, how not to wobble on the runway. Don't put wheels like that if you want to wobble. If you don't want to wobble. If you want to wobble. Because what happens is, the way KSP figures it out, it doesn't like just roll. It tends to teeter and totter. So, if you want to mount them on the side, make them straight up and down. Oop. So now I'm going to put these here. And you want your center of mass generally close to one of the wheels. So I'm going to move these wheels up here. So now, what'll happen is, since these front wheels are higher than these back wheels, it will tend to lean in a slightly upward direction on the ground. And pointing towards the air, as you pick up airspeed, that'll just help you get into the air faster. Alright, so next we're going to do vertical stabilizers. I generally use these wings because of their low mass, but a lot of things will do. Look, 0.02 and 0.4. These are 0.04 and 0.7. So these are fine. They will get you most places. And I recommend a dual setup. And you don't want these on an angle because then they'll try and control your pitch, yaw, and roll. Whereas you just want them to worry about yaw. And so it's less likely to happen if you mount them vertically. The reason I do 2 is because these actually have like lift associated with them, and when you do symmetry, the lift should negate itself. But if you do a single one, I've run into times when for some reason it thinks that they're actually trying to lift you. So now we're going to do struts, and I generally do struts on the bottom because it looks nicer. And we want to strut up these wings all the way out here, and so we want to go from the lowest wing to the highest wing. So you can't really see that too well. Let's see if I can zoom in. But you get the idea. They're attached to each other. That'll help you so that when you're re-entering, you won't lose any wings. Because that's generally not a good thing. One last thing I'm going to do. You don't need to do this all the time, but it helps if you add 1 or 2 struts like that. Of course, you can always throw struts on the top, and that's perfectly fine. So, now we are going to put air intakes on. And the way I put air intakes on is essentially 2 at a time. So we're going to take this small cubic octagonal strut, and it's 2 small rotations. I hold shift and S. And I think it's 2 small rotations. Yeah. Let me make sure. Hold on. Space. 1, 2. Well, that's odd. It's doing it funny today. Oops. Alright. Get rid of that. So we're going to start up here, and we don't want to attach them like this, because I'll show you why in a second. when you attach them like that, you can only get one on there. You see how it doesn't even try and snap to the back of that? Yeah, I'll show you how to do that in just a second. In fact, right now. So we're going to center on this, and we're going to place this as close to the center as you possibly can. And now you see there are two snap zones, one in back and one in front. So this is an interesting trick. If you place it, and then sometimes if you move it back, it'll want to place, especially if you copy and paste. However, I think the landing gear in the front is getting in the way. See that? That's great. That's what we want. Now you can put the landing gear back on. This is just KSP in its clipping. So now I want you to zoom in inside the RAM air intake and find the cubic octagonal strut that holds both of them, and hold Alt to copy it and click on it. And now you have a set of air intakes. And we're going to actually copy this over to the other side. And sometimes it won't want to copy. So you're just going to have to put it on manually. But what you can also do is take this thing off entirely and then do symmetry with the cubic octag. So something like that. See, that looks good. It looks like it was kind of naturally there, and we're not even using the part clipping setting. I'll just open the debug menu, show you real quick. Okay, so now I take that same thing and I rotate it 4 times on the wings. So, well, I rotate it until they look straight on the wings. And your aim is between 10 and 15 intakes per engine. So we are going to go for, I think we're going to go for 6 of these double things on each side. So there's 3 sets, 4 sets. Come on. There it is. 5 sets. And since we rotated the wings so that they're flat, we don't have to worry about them re-rotating them. And there's 6. So now we have 12 intakes per engine, which is a good baseline. We have to give this a name, so I'll give it the Tutorial Mark II, because we may as well. And we're almost ready for launch, except I noticed that I made that off kilter. Alright, notice how our center of lift is still really close to center of mass? That's because the RAM air intakes don't weigh that much, and you'll really save a lot of delta V if you can just use a lot of them. Alright, so we have a name, we have a plane. Now we want to set up action groups. Of course, pick the stupidest guy you can. So we don't want Jeb, we want Bill. Because if they die, you don't want to kill a smart guy, right? That's my reasoning. Anyhow, you can also take these, and I have done it on several craft of mine, and put them on the wings, and then rotate them so that they're forward. That works actually quite well, even though it doesn't look as good. Well, depends what you like aesthetically, I guess. So now we have to think about fuel flow. I think this is fine because right now all of our fuel drain is kind of in the center. All of our fuel will be generally in the center, and it won't deviate much. So I think we're good for now. But later, maybe in another tutorial or something, I'll show you a design that's just ridiculous and you really have to worry about it. If you did multiple stacks of these tanks, you would. If you had multiple of these, you would, other than maybe just 2. Alright, so now we're going to go into action groups, and we're going to learn what to do with our different RAM intakes. So why do we close intakes? We're going to close intakes because the drag on a closed intake is less than the drag on an open intake. So what that means is you'll go faster if you have less intakes open through an atmosphere. So what we're gonna do, the first action group is actually, I always toggle the jet engines, and you'll notice if you take off the one engine and you put it back on symmetry, it'll show it still here, but it'll only toggle the one engine. So you want to make sure that both are toggled. And the way you can do this is click on each side and make sure there's no extra option to toggle it. I always do 2 as my rocket. Now, of course, this is all up to you guys. And 3, starts my air intakes. And I do it an interesting way. I do it so that it's reverse order. So my 3 will be the majority of my intakes, so about half. And the reason we do this is because we're going to toggle it at high altitude. So, sorry about that. The air intakes, I toggle one by one, so we have to actually undo some of these toggles. I don't want any of these to be toggled, and I don't want that one to be toggled, or this one. So 3 is the majority of it. So now we'll move on to 4, which will be the rest of these. And then these 2 will just leave open. These 4 will just leave open the whole time. So I'm going to save it. So that means, so we have 3 and 4 toggled to intake. So on liftoff, we want to toggle both 3 and 4 so that all our intakes are closed. So we're going to try launching that now and try to get to orbit. Make sure all our hotkeys work. So now this will be a very similar procedure to what we did in basic SSTO tutorial. But we're going to have to mess with the hotkeys to make sure we're going fast enough. I also might come back and add some control surfaces in the front, but we'll see. So 1 works, 2 works. Let's see, does 3 should toggle those. And then 4 toggles these guys. Okay, so we'll want to just tap our brakes, load up our jets, and turn on the lights, because lights are cool. And there's no IVA for this. We got Jeb. So now we want to be careful we don't hit the nuke. That's like, alright, there we go. So I'm going to turn on SAS, pull in the gear, and basically you want to go full throttle the whole time. However, if a wing falls off, that's generally not good, and you want to try and land it as soon as possible. If you don't have the ability to land it with this wing, then you're not a skillful pilot. Therefore, you will see that I might be a skillful pilot. Oh dear. And he died. So I'm not a skillful pilot. So let's try that again. That may be an indicator that we need more struts. See, it's these little cues you pick up on. Okay, and let's go 3, 4, so that most of our intakes are closed. And you generally want to bring up this resources tab. So hopefully this time everything will go smoothly. That's better. I have no idea what happened last time. And we're going to want to try and stay as close to the 90 pitch heading as possible. I don't like how that's flexing, but that's okay. So I pitch up to about 60 degrees. And you'll notice that the jets are burning liquid fuel from there, but that's fine because the nuke will take the oxidizer from here and the liquid fuel from here. So generally I pitch up to about 60 or 70 degrees. If you start decelerating, don't worry too much, but if it's really bad, then I'd start worrying about it. And we're going to get down to 0.15 before we open up our second set of intakes. I think that intakes look a lot better when they're sideways like this. So we're going to get up to about 12,000. And now we wait. So as we climb, you'll notice that we are increasing speed. That's because these output more thrust the higher they get in the atmosphere. And you notice our specific impulse jumped up from what it was on the ground as well. And our air intakes are getting almost full amounts of air. So if you're really speeding up, you can always increase your angle. And the new SAS is wonderful for this in 0.21. So we have a lot of power for this, and we're going to actually use this to our advantage. With all these intakes, we should be able to get a good suborbital trajectory even before we kick in the nuke. So I found the best way to build an SSTO is like you'll always be in space, because you should build it so that as you get higher and higher, well, basically as you're going, you get up to orbital velocity. So now we're getting around 12,000, so we're going to start pitching down. I'm just kind of pointing at the bottom of our prograde vector for this. And we're going to angle ourselves at about, for this one, about 20 degrees. So I don't want this prograde marker to go below the horizon, which is the blue and the brown. And I'm also looking at this vertical speed indicator. I want it somewhere in between 10 and 100 for right now. You notice we're accelerating really fast. So that's good. You'll hit a certain point at, depending on what altitude you're at, it'll change your speed, where you'll start increasing speed really slowly. And at that point you want to pitch up more. So right now we're still increasing pretty quickly because our thrust is increasing fairly quickly as well. So we're going to keep this pitch. And once we start slowing, our acceleration starts slowing down, we're going to pitch up some more. It's also interesting to note that the Clampetron docking port, this one has less mass than the shielded one and the same drag. So there's really no point in using the shielded one. So you notice we're not accelerating as fast. So I'm going to pitch up to about 20. And you may have to fight, well, you won't have to fight. You may have to manually try and hold it, depending how ASAS helps you. And we're looking at our air intake and we're fine. We shouldn't have to worry about opening one until perhaps maybe 20,000. Okay, now we're a little bit above 100, so it's a little uncomfortable for me. I'm just going to let ASAS take over for a little bit. Okay, so we're still increasing our speed and our goal speed and goal altitude. So we want to get up to 23 kilometers, I'd say. Okay, 0.22, we're getting ready to open our next set of air intakes. So that'll be these guys. As soon as we hit 0.15. And notice we're going up a little fast, so I'm going to pitch down a little more. And watch that air intake. That's #1 priority. So we're going at about 1,000 meters per second, starting to get some re-entry effects. And I'm going to actually point a little lower. And we're just about to open our air intakes. And they're opened. Notice how our air intake air jumped. So I'm kind of letting ASAS take it from me right now. But if you have an aircraft with less lift on it, so say you had perhaps an orange tank in this wing setup, then you might want to consider pitching up higher. The more lift you can give your aircraft, the better, because if you have more lift, the more prograde you can point your jets. So again, my hands are off the controls right now. It's all ASAS, which is it's just wonderful. It's so smooth and steady. I don't think any flight events have happened. And so we're climbing at a steady rate, we're accelerating at a steady rate. So we can basically leave it. We can see how far we've burned through our liquid fuel. So right now we've burned through 113 liquid fuel. So we have a total of 240 just liquid fuel, so that should be our goal burn, because you don't want to burn any of the liquid fuel out of here, or else you'll have dead weight oxidizer hanging with you the whole time. So we're going to try and get this into orbit, and then we'll check out how much delta V we have by calculating it. So you notice we still have a fair amount of intake air, and we're starting to lose thrust. That's completely normal, because the higher you get in the atmosphere and the faster you go, the less thrust you get. In fact, I think it's more has to do with airspeed. So we're going to point a little down, trying to accelerate a little faster. And at this time, the specific impulses should be dropping. And they'll eventually drop to about 800. So it'll start sucking up fuel. Notice our fuel usage is going up as the specific impulse drops. So at this point, you can start pointing a slightly more prograde. And our goal speed right now is about 2,000 meters per second. It seems a little crazy for now, but if we continue climbing at this rate, we should easily achieve it. Now it's 0.18. I'm getting ready to open the next stack of intake air. And I'm just going to take you to orbit, and you can do whatever you want with your craft once it's in orbit, but this is just how to get it there. So 0.16. Soon we'll be at 0.15. Okay, so now see how we have more intake air? That's what we want. So we want to look here, and you notice we're going pretty fast, which is awesome, but still not fast enough. So depending on your craft, you'll probably want to point somewhere in between 10 and 20 degrees, unless you have, this one has a little too much lift, well, not too much lift, but I probably could have gone without half of the wings maybe, and still made it. It's just less efficient to get into orbit. So that's another thing you have to balance. How many wings do you want? You need enough wings to get it in the air, obviously, but if you can, the more wings, the easier it'll be to get it actually into orbit. But once you're there, you have more dead mass to carry around. Mind you, the wings don't weigh much, so you generally opt on the side of more wings. So I'm going to pitch down some more. You'll notice as we fly over the terrain, seem to be pitching up, but it's actually the Kerbal rotating underneath us. And so we're getting down to like 0.26. So at about 0.14, I'm going to start throttling down, and I'm going to try and make it scalar. So if we get 0.7, I should be at about half throttle. So we're finally getting up to about 2,000 meters per second. We've burned off 164 of our fuel, so we have 240, so that's fine. If you have a little jet fuel left, you can just use it later if you ever re-enter atmosphere to perhaps fly back to KSC. If not, then you'd have to conserve some of your rocket fuel for the jet. And we're getting up to 2,000 meters per second. I must say, this update with the ASAS, with the SAS in general, it's just made flying SSTOs so wonderful. No longer do I need MechJeb. And you'll notice your apoapse is getting out there really fast. That's because as we go faster, we're actually escaping the gravity, and so we're shooting out faster than the gravity can pull us down. And you can look at our orbital speed, and we're already almost up to orbital velocity. But mind you, some of that will bleed off as we get closer to our apoapse. So we're at 0.13, so I'm going to throttle down to about 1/3 and wait till we're at about 0.09 and then throttle back to half. As long as you want to squeeze as much as you can out of these jets, but you don't want to flame out. So hopefully the SAS will help you if you do end up flaming out, but what I recommend is if you flame out, just hit your hotkeys, because the thrust will be still different, so it'll still try to torque you. So we're at 0.7, go half. And let's point, now you can just point prograde. And now we have our apoapse at 63,000, we're getting really close. And we flat spinned a little. So now what you do is you just cut your thrust, and as you're coming back, reinstate your thrust. So we'll want to go about 1/3, and as long as you can accelerate prograde, it's a positive. Alright. So now you can cut your jets, load up your nuke, and start burning. Just so it accelerates you, you don't want to burn too much, and you want to get out of atmosphere. So you can also burn it slightly higher than prograde, and that'll get you out of the atmosphere slightly faster. So we'll want to go for probably an 80 or 90. So you can time warp. 90. Alright, so you want to shoot a little bit above your desired altitude because it'll come down. See? So now we have a periapsis. It's very small, but it is there. And we're basically out of the atmosphere. Now you can, if you want, kick back in your jets and just put on minimum thrust if they aren't flaming out. But mine are. See, we're too high. See, I can squeeze a couple kilonewtons out of them now. And that will actually help our apoaps and maintain it while we're flying through the atmosphere. So now we're basically out of the atmosphere. We'll shut off our jet and we'll warp until we get completely out of the atmosphere. You might want to think about quick saving as soon as you get out of the atmosphere. But you'll notice we have essentially two full, basically we have half an orange tank, I believe. No, a quarter of an orange tank. Some space music. We're in space. Let's save it. Time warp around to our apoaps. And see how we're basically at orbital velocity. That's what's so great about SSTOs. Okay. Our nuke is on, our jets are not. Burn. And there's our periapsis already. So you want to try and fly at 90 as much as you possibly can. So I think that'll do it for the tutorial once we're in orbit. You have a ton of fuel. You could easily get out to Mun and most likely land on it. You could probably get out even farther than that if you wanted to. 92 by 93. There you have an SSTO in orbit with almost all of its fuel left and some jet fuel to spare. So if we actually go in and transfer so that it should just about match your oxidizer. You don't have to do this at all. So we're just going to make it roughly match because it'll draw from wherever you put it. And we can see roughly how much jet fuel we have left. Okay, we have about 40 jet fuel. So way to get rid of that, if I remember correctly, is if you turn on your jets and throttle up, nothing happens. So I guess I was wrong on that, but let's get this thing in the light so we can appreciate it. And this was an advanced SSTO tutorial. If you like the video, please like the video and comment if you thought it was interesting or have any feedback, and subscribe if you haven't. Thanks for watching. This has been Derp Nerd. Take care.